What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Fireside Giants. I'm your host, Anthony Rivardo, joined by my co-host, Alex Wilson. And we've been talking a lot about the quarterbacks in the upcoming 2025 NFL draft class. Last week, we went 3 straight days in a row just watching live film, all 22 film on some live streams with you guys. That was a lot of fun. We plan on doing that again this week. Taking a look at some of those later round draft prospects at the quarterback position. We're going to look at Will Howard coming off of his national championship victory in the coming days. But we want to kind of reflect and review the players that we watched last week with you guys. Those 4 quarterbacks that we watched. Cameron Ward, obviously we watched Shedeur Sanders, we watched Jackson Dart, we watched Jalen Milroe. We want to take a look at those 4 guys and kind of review and give our early rankings of those 4 prospects, where we think they should go in the draft, where we think the Giants should target them, whether or not we even think the Giants should target those 4 guys, and just our overall thoughts and feelings reacting to the film that we watched last week. And I've watched some additional film on some of these guys as well. I was taking a look at some more of Jackson Dart yesterday, so I've got some new information that I want to bring to the table as well, and really just talk through these prospects and again give you guys our initial early rankings. And I can't stress enough early rankings because it is January and it's a long process. You've got the combine coming up next month. Before then, there's the Senior Bowl, which a couple of these prospects are going to be competing in. You've also got the East-West Shrine Bowl, which I know Shedeur Sanders is going to be competing in. So we have a lot more information to gather and process between now and April's NFL draft. But taking a look at these early rankings, that's what we want to do in today's episode, give you our initial thoughts and feelings on the big 4 quarterback prospects in the upcoming 2025 NFL draft class for the New York Giants. So that's what we're going to do in today's episode. Let's waste no more time. Alex, how are you doing today, my friend? And how are you feeling? We've had a lot of conversations. This is a weaker NFL draft class from the quarterback position, right? Especially compared to last year. But after watching those 4 guys and really diving into the All-22, how are you feeling about this class? Do you think it might be a little bit underrated?
I wouldn't say underrated. What I would say is that in context with this class, there are some high upside players and there are certainly some bust candidates as well. There is no one in this class that even closely mirrors my affection for Jaden Daniels and even Drake May on your side of things. I think that those 2 guys were head and shoulders above the guys in this class from a tangibles perspective, from a processing perspective, from an upside perspective. I think Cam Ward has the most upside in this draft by quite a significant margin. But after watching his game film, and we'll go through more games, of course, so this is early. This is very early. We're going to do multiple film breakdowns for each of these guys. I do personally think that Cam Ward, there's a lot of bust potential there too. His decision making at times is not good. His footwork can fail him. When he changes his arm slot, he can sail throws. He needs a lot of work, and it's going to start with sitting for at least half a season at the NFL level. He is not a player I'm putting in as a starter day one. Neither is Sanders, neither is Dart, neither is Milroe. None of these guys should be starting day one. And to be fair, they did it right with Drake May, and I know Jaden Daniels started day one. He's been amazing, and I think that he's a very, very rare breed, and we called that out last year when the draft was kind of a couple of months before even. But looking at Cam Ward, and he's my number 1 in this draft class, so we'll start there. He's my number 1 quarterback in this draft, but the downside of Cam Ward is substantial, right? If he does not reel it in, if he does not fix his fundamentals, if he does not improve, and I think he will, but he needs to be in the right with the right coaching. All of these quarterbacks, the downside is that if they're not in a good spot with the coaching, if the scheme does not tailor itself to their strengths, they're going to struggle, and it's going to be bad. And I think that my take, Sanders will have a better rookie season than Cam Ward, still stands, and the reason I believe that is because Sanders is coming from an offense that is an NFL style offense, right? He is going to step in day one, make the high percentage throws, showcase accuracy. He's going to, navigate the pocket well, but his upside is going to be limited. And I think that when it comes to big explosive plays, Cam Ward is going to have a lot more of those. And if Cam Ward can learn to be an NFL quarterback, make the high percentage throws, not always look for the home run, take what defenses are giving him, he's going to be a phenomenal player. But there's a long way to go for him to really learn how to create that balance. And that balance is going to be critical to his game. So while I do love Cam Ward because of his elite upside, there's a lot of work that needs to happen for him to become a competent, everyday, just consistent quarterback. And that kind of is why the Giants could end up drafting Sanders and why Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll may be attracted to a player like that. Anthony, you said it in the past. Sanders is the most consistent player, right? He may not be the best or they have the most upside, but he's going to give you consistency. And Brian Dable continues to say, we lacked consistency at quarterback. That is going to be something they're looking for. So I do think that that's an interesting talking point. But, you watched Cam Ward just as I did. You probably even watched more than him than I have. What is your take on him in terms of his baseline? Obviously, his upside is substantial, but he's got to go to the right system, and he needs to have a good offensive line, and he needs to have a lot working for him to see that expedited development over the first 2 years of his career, in my opinion.
Well, we're talking about Cam Ward. That's your QB1, correct? Who said that's my QB1? Maybe he's not.
Yeah, that's true. He might not
No,
be.
he
Who's
is.
your QB?
He is,
Okay.
but okay. But I mentioned that to preface. It's not that wide of a gap for me anymore. That's why I said that, because yes, he is still my QB1. He's been my QB1 the entire time. As I've said many times on this channel, for the 2024 NFL Draft, I watched a gross amount of film on all of those quarterback prospects, Cam Ward included, because he initially declared for the 2024 draft class. So I did watch him for last April's draft. He ended up rescinding his declaration, ended up going and transferring to Miami and playing one more year of college ball. A spectacular year it was. Heisman finalists campaign from Cam Ward. And again, because of what he did at Washington State prior to declaring in 2024, because of what he did in 2024 at Miami, he has been and still is my QB1. But I have to say, Alex, after diving into more of his film and after diving into more of Shedeur Sanders' film last week, the gap is not that wide for me anymore. I do think that it's a little bit closer between these two guys. And I do think that, yes, Cam Ward's my QB1 and Shedeur is my QB2, but I thought there was a wider gap of talent between those two guys. And let me explain why. With Cam Ward, the upside is tremendous. It's absolutely limitless. I've made the comparisons for him. I think as a pro playing style comparison, Dak Prescott is perfect. They both have pretty good mobility and escapability within the pocket. They both manage the pocket well, and they both have strong arms with ability to layer passes downfield. However, they both have a propensity for turning the ball over and playing too much hero ball. That is the criticism for Dak Prescott. That is the criticism for Cam Ward, and that's why I love that comparison so much. And I know some fans don't love that comparison. Maybe you like a Jordan Love. Maybe you don't even like pro comparisons, and that's totally respectable as well. But one last point that I'm going to make on that comparison between Cam Ward and Dak Prescott, some people said to me that they thought it wasn't a good comparison because Cam Ward is more mobile than Dak. That's not true, because I'm referring to prime Dak. Dak in his first few seasons of his career averaged more rushing yards per game than Cam Ward ever has. And in his collegiate career, Dak averaged over 40 rushing yards per game compared to Cam Ward, who only averages 20. So I actually think it's a more spot-on comparison than people thought. And in fact, I think Dak is actually more athletic than Cam was, which is a little bit of a knock on Cam, because I would like to see him be a little bit more of a mobile athlete. Now, he isn't a bad mobile athlete. He doesn't lack athleticism by any means, but it's not the major strength of his game. You're not going to call read options, zone options. I think that you actually have more of a rushing element in the skill set of a Jackson Dart, who we're going to discuss in a little bit, than you even have with Cam Ward. And again, one of the reasons why this gap is beginning to close for me, Alex, is because as we watch the film between Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders, I noticed that Shedeur Sanders' ability to escape the pocket and create some plays with his legs wasn't that far off from what Cam Ward is able to do. I think Cam Ward is a better runner with the football in his hands, but in terms of play extension, Cam Ward is probably neck and neck with him for me. Shedeur Sanders is probably neck and neck with Cam Ward for me, because Shedeur is able to get out of the pocket and make throws downfield. I thought a lot of times when Cam Ward escaped the pocket, yes, he was able to make some plays happen with his arm, but oftentimes he did just take off with his legs and didn't have a whole lot of ability to gain serious yardage. He's not popping 40-yard runs like a Jackson Dart actually is capable of doing after diving into his film a little bit more. I don't see Cam Ward taking off for 40 yards in a scamper. However, I could see him taking off for 15, 20 at a time. But again, I think there's more value in Shedeur Sanders being able to get out of the pocket and make those plays with his arm outside of the pocket than just picking up the 15 yards on the ground, because you've got a lot more room to create yardage when throwing outside of the pocket. And again, Cam Ward is good at that too. But another reason why this gap is starting to kind of enclose for me, Cam Ward's decision making is, as we all know, a little bit of a wild card. He could be very inconsistent. But as I dove into the film more, I realized that the decision making had real red flag potential to it. Like, it wasn't just something that I think can be coached and corrected. It got to a point where a lot of these plays that we were looking at, Alex, I felt like he was leaving so much meat on the bone. There were so many opportunities where it was like clear, obvious check down. Guy doesn't have anybody within 10 yards of him, and he's not throwing that pass. And while he gets away with it in the ACC at Miami, he's able to put a rope or throw the ball on a rope 30 yards downfield to the right hash. No big deal. Okay, big completion. In the NFL, where things are much different in terms of the speed and pace of the game and the IQ of safeties, I don't think you get away with a lot of those throws that you get away with in the ACC. And I think you need to be comfortable taking those checkdowns. And again, I think you can be coached to take those checkdowns if you're Cam Ward. I think absolutely in the right system, a coach says, hey, you've got all that meat on the bone, just eat it. Just throw it to that checkdown, throw it to that drag route. But some coaches aren't able to connect in that way, and some quarterbacks aren't able to correct that. There are quarterbacks who do correct it, and they end up taking their checkdowns eventually. Others, for some reason, just want to continue to play hero ball. And the hero ball was a problem for Cam Ward at Washington State, and it remained a problem for him at Miami. And I know Miami's defense was terrible. He had to put up points every single drive, and that probably had a lot to do with it. However, I thought there were a lot more opportunities than I realized on his film where he simply just wasn't taking the open man and was trusting his arm too much and forcing the ball downfield a little bit too frequently. Again, it created some opportunities, Alex, to show off his arm strength, to create some big-time plays and show his aggression and his explosiveness, which are all things that I praise, but it's a double-edged sword. And because of how frequently he was leaving these open routes on the field and not taking what the defense was giving him, I did start to become concerned. I think when you look at the accuracy percentage between him compared to Shedeur Sanders, when you look at the first read to second read to third read percentages, all of those things, Cam Ward is closing that gap for me as I evaluate him further. Shedeur Sanders is closing that gap for me as I evaluate him further. So I know that I kind of talked a lot about Shedeur there as well. And again, guys, I love Cam Ward. He's been my QB1. He still is my QB1. I think that ceiling is so high for him. I think he's got incredible pocket management, and that's the last point that I'll make before I hand it back to you, Alex. If there's one thing that I value in a quarterback prospect, it is their ability to navigate the pocket. That was what made Caleb Williams such a special prospect last year. It wasn't the fact that he escaped the pocket so much. It was the fact that he would escape pressure and remain in the pocket and make plays from the pocket. That's why he was so impressive. And who had the same trait? Well, of course, Jaden Daniels would stay in the pocket, make plays from the pocket, and navigate through the pressure. Cam Ward does that to a similar level as those guys. Not the same high level, but similar. He's getting there. He really is able to navigate. Pressure across his face. Okay, step back. Oh, now it's from the left side. Let me get to the right side. Get back into the center of the pocket. Cam Ward can do that. He can make 3 to 4 moves all in the pocket on the same play in order to buy time for his receivers to get open downfield. That is a valuable and special trait that, honestly, if there's anything that can't be taught, it's that trait right there. That is the unteachable trait that I see in Cam Ward that tells me he has absolute superstar ability. So that's why he's my QB1 above all other reasons. But again, because of his tendency to force these balls and play a little bit too much hero ball, Shedeur Sanders is starting to close the gap for me in these quarterback rankings. But Alex, I'll give you a chance to respond to some of those pros and cons that I mentioned for Cam Ward. And of course, as we segue into our combined QB2 as Shedeur Sanders, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on him as well.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to Cam, the red flags for me are he can abandon his fundamentals when he's trying to get very, very crazy with his decision making. When he wants to hit the home runs, when he wants to make something happen, he will just completely abandon his fundamentals. His arm will drop. His footwork is bad. Like and he makes these plays anyway sometimes, and it's like, oh wow, like it's amazing. But it's at the collegiate level. If he abandons his fundamentals, he abandons his footwork, abandons his arm, and everything that goes into making him a great quarterback, he will turn the ball over substantially. And I think the biggest red flag is the one you pointed out. He refuses sometimes. Like, his processing is good. You watch him scan the field, like bam, 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 bam. There's 2 things that frustrate me, though. One, he will skip right over open receivers at times. Like, he processes almost like just to process. Like, he doesn't actually like look at some of these players like for more than a split second. He will see them and just keep on going because he just wants to get all the way to his last progression, instead of taking his second option, taking his third option that may be available. And I think that's a problem because he's just progressing. He's just processing just to process. It's not actually, there's not like much depth to it. And we see it all the time. We've seen open receivers in the last game that we watched. How many open receivers did we see him literally just go zoop right past, and then he tried to force the ball to somebody else as his last read? And it's like, wait a second. You had an open guy, and then he tried to force it to the fourth option, the third option, and he was covered. So, like, he's just processing without much depth to it. And at times, not all the time, but at times, that was a bit of a red flag. The second one is, like you said, he refuses to throw his fucking checkdowns. Excuse my language, that pisses me off because it's like, yo, come on. at the NFL level and you have an open running back with nobody around him because the defense is terrified, absolutely terrified of you beating them downfield, beating them with the home run ball. They're basically ignoring your checkdowns. Take what they're giving you, man. He could have picked up multiple first downs just by throwing to his running back. Just literally, doesn't you have to go through his progressions. Just literally hold the ball and just check it down. They're not even covering him at times in that game. Who was it that we watched again? It wasn't Duke, was it? It was Duke, I believe. We watched him watched him play again. So
Duke game.
And that defense was not good, and they literally just abandoned his checkdowns. They knew he was trying to hit the home run ball every single time, and I feel as though that will bite him badly in the NFL. You have to be able to hit your checkdowns in the NFL. If you ignore them, you are going to throw interceptions. You are going to make really, really bad mistakes. So that is a part of his game that needs to get better. But aside from those red flags, the pocket presence, it's elite. Right? The arm slots, it's elite. Sometimes he gets cute, and I do think that Sanders does this a lot better than Cam Ward on these screen passes. Sanders will change his feet. He'll flip his feet, make an accurate throw. Cam Ward does this thing where he stands base facing the end zone, and he'll sidearm it this way, and he will make inaccurate screen throws. And I'm like, dude, just freaking use your feet. Just transition your weight. Make accurate throws. He makes things and that's the thing with Cam Ward. He makes things astronomically more difficult for himself at times. And it's just because it's his play style, and they need to coach that out of him, in my opinion. Not that they have to change him, because I think that's what makes him great, but it's the little unnecessary things that I think doesn't help him at times that annoy me.
Yeah, and I got to say on that point, it's a little bit confusing when he has these inconsistencies in his throwing motion pop up because, again, going back to that pocket management that he has, one of the other traits that I think is so special, he's got such an ability to flip his hips, turn and burn that football. Like, he really does use his hips a lot, which generates so much torque, momentum, and velocity in his passes, right? In his throwing motion, there's so much torque, the velocity, the ball just zips out of his hand because he's got really sound hips and a solid base that he throws from in the pocket. But then there are other times where he's clanking his feet together, he's doing a tap dance back there, he's tripping over himself, and he's throwing inaccurate passes because of it, especially for some reason when he's throwing behind the line of scrimmage, as you mentioned. It's very confusing why he doesn't have those little aspects of his game tied down. The details matter. Ask Tom Brady. Ask Shedeur Sanders even. The details are so important for young quarterbacks to get right. And for some reason, Cam Ward seems to forget about the details sometimes, and that is completely coachable, I do think. I think a good coach will correct his footwork, will get him to throw from the proper motion, set his feet, and get those screen passes out on time and accurate, but it is something to monitor if he doesn't fix those little details. Those little details add up, and when you get to a playoff game, those details need to be right. So I think that's a very important detail to bring up, Alex. We're already 20 minutes into this thing. Let's dive into Shedeur Sanders and talk about him. Spent a lot of time on our QB1. You guys already knew Cam Ward was the QB1, but I think our updated analysis was important to give. Now, with Shedeur Sanders, Alex, I do have some updates on my analysis there. And I will say I am a lot more impressed with him now after watching some more film than I was upon my initial study, because he does run the offense. That was one thing. Out of all these guys that we're going to talk about in today's episode, Alex, Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders, Jalen Milroe, and Jackson Dart, none of them run the offense the way that Shedeur Sanders does. The impression that I got from watching Sanders is that he has autonomy at the line of scrimmage, which is very rare to see a college quarterback have. We know that he runs this pro-style offense with Pat Shurmur as his offensive coordinator. But a lot of the concepts that they're running and a lot of the things that they're asking him to do, they're really asking him to carry that offense. They didn't have a rushing attack, which is something that you mentioned, Alex. But to me, their rushing attack was their screen passing game and their short passing game. And that is asking basically your quarterback to make sure that every time he throws any of these short passes, he's throwing them with pinpoint accuracy and he's throwing them on time so that the receivers and running backs can create yards after the catch. That was their running game. They didn't ask him to hand the ball off a whole lot. They asked him to throw the ball as an extension of their rushing attack. And that was, to me, very eye-opening to how much they really asked of Sanders at Colorado. He pretty much was the entire offense. And I know, not the entire offense. They had some great skill position players. Alex's boy Wester, obviously Travis Hunter. They have that other speedy guy, number 5, whatever. They have some talent in that receiving core. I understand that. But in terms of running the scheme, diagnosing the defenses, Sanders was asked to do a lot more and was given a lot more responsibility than I think any of the other quarterbacks in this draft class, which is why he's starting to close that gap and rise up in my rankings here in this draft class. Alex, what's your take on that? The amount of responsibility that was entrusted into Sanders and the way that he really came and rose to the occasion in such a demanding offense.
So when it comes to Shedeur Sanders, I do think that there's a couple of, I'll talk about the pros and cons of after we watched him. And the cons are simply this: really weak competition. So we saw him dominate against bad football teams from pretty much the whole year. And then the one time he played two ranked teams, you've mentioned this, the one ranked team he played against BYU absolutely killed him. So the lack of competition is concerning to me. I think that his traits, his fundamentals, his technique, all of those things will translate, right? He has a lot of really good fundamentals, and those things will translate at the next level. But the speed and strength of the NFL is going to blindside Sanders at the first couple of weeks of his career. Like, he's going to have an adjustment period because there plays where he was able to escape at the collegiate level, he's not going to escape in the NFL, where he was able to buy time and, escape tackles and use his limited athleticism. Like, that will hurt him. However, his fundamentals will save him in the end of the day. And I think that that's where I lean on him as, like, he's my QB too, because he's got the best fundamentals in this draft class, and it's not even really close. Like, his footwork is great. His hips, pretty solid. His arm, it's good. It's not, I wouldn't say it's elite arm talent, but he's got good strength on his arm. He has the best touch, though, in the draft at the quarterback position. His touch on deep passes, his touch on fade routes, there is nobody better, and it's pinpoint accuracy. So there's a lot to like about him in terms of his actual attributes as a quarterback. It's just his familiarity with good competition that is going to be the biggest hurdle for him. But he'll learn how to adjust to that. He has a long career ahead of him in the NFL, so he'll have plenty of time to adjust to the next level of competition. I think he would be a great candidate for using that virtual reality thing that Jaden Daniels uses, because that would help him adjust to the game speed of the NFL before he ever steps foot in the NFL. I think that's a really good idea for the Giants. If they draft Sanders, they got to have that man in the freaking VR machine every single day, preparing for the speed of the next level, because it is going to blindside him if he does not put that work in. And that's kind of where I see could be a benefit. I think not a bad idea.
No, that's a tremendous idea. I think that article is going to be a bombshell in NFL circles. Like, that
Should
article
be.
about Jaden Daniels and the virtual reality that he's been using, I think that's going to become a mandate across the NFL. Every team is going to want to use that on their young quarterbacks. Even if they have a franchise quarterback, they're going to want him to take those reps in the VR headset anyway. What Jaden Daniels has done this year is unprecedented, and the fact that he credits so much of it to that VR training, yeah, watch that spread across the NFL just like a disease. Everybody's going to be doing that by the end of next season, and I'm actually really excited for that because I think it's going to create a much better product on the football field across the league. League-wide, I think we'll get better quarterback play. And to be honest, quarterback play has been great towards the second half of the season. First half of the season, things were really slow.
Yep.
I think that has a lot to do with the preseason. We could have a whole nother conversation about the impact that a potential 18th game on the schedule would have on so many different things, but we won't have that here. But again, I think the VR training is important. I think that you bring that up for Sanders is also important. One other thing that I want to say about Shedeur Sanders is I think that he maybe reads the field better than anybody in this class, and he is so good at calculated risks. That's a really important buzzword that I'm going to use for him throughout this process, because it's not that he doesn't take shots downfield. He hit nearly as many big-time throws as Jackson Dart and Cam Ward did, but he didn't have a single turnover-worthy play on 20-plus yard passes. That is almost unfathomable to me. I don't know how he escaped the entire season throwing as many deep passes as he did. He threw more attempts than anybody in college football. He threw the ball almost every single play, and he didn't have a single turnover-worthy throw on 20-plus yard passes. I get it. You could say, oh, well, that's scheme-related, that's talent-related, he's not going up against good competition. No, it's not. That's his individual talent, because even if you're going up against bad competition, at some point, you're bound to throw a turnover-worthy pass, right? Apparently not if you're Shedeur Sanders. He is so good at keeping the ball out of harm's way and taking calculated risks. Because again, it's not like he wasn't throwing the ball downfield. We used to always complain, Alex, throw our hands in the air. Daniel Jones, why not just throw it up there? Take the risk, throw it downfield. He would have a very low number of turnover-worthy plays, but he would have like no deep passing attempts. Shedeur Sanders is not the same. He doesn't have any turnover-worthy plays, but he's got a ton of deep passing attempts. He loves to play aggressive, push the ball downfield, put it into tight windows, but doesn't put it in the riskiest spots where he's throwing picks. And I think that's a really impressive trait that he has, because it's not necessarily a luck thing, or it's not necessarily an arm strength thing. That is a mental processing thing, and that's why guys get so excited about Shedeur, and they create these lofty comparisons for him, because you do see the potential, Alex, for him to win at the line of scrimmage, pre-snap. You can see that he does read coverages, that he does know where to go with the football every single play. And because he knows where to go with the football, he's able to take those calculated risks, and he's able to layer the throw between zone coverages and put the ball where it needs to be on time and in rhythm. All of those traits are what are going to make him, in my opinion, a successful quarterback as a rookie. I know you just mentioned that the talent level is a big difference for him, and hey, I agree with you. That's going to be a hurdle for him to jump over. However, I think because he's played in this pro-style offense and he's already so adept in reading coverages and making changes at the line of scrimmage, he's actually got a better chance of competing day one than any of the other quarterbacks in this draft class because of his pre-snap processing to post-snap processing. He reads coverages. He diagnoses defenses better than anybody in this class. It's impressive to me. I think he's only going to grow in that skill as well. I think he's going to be a tremendous talent at the next level if he's in the right situation. And again, situation's everything with these guys. I love Cam Ward. If he goes to the wrong situation, I mean, I could totally see, if he goes to the Browns, Alex, I could see them ruining him and he's out of league in 3 years, right? Because they're the Cleveland Browns. They do that to quarterbacks. But if he goes to the right situation, I don't know which situation that would be, Cam Ward's ceiling is limitless. I feel similarly about Shedeur Sanders. I really think that his ability to diagnose and read defenses is so strong. And that's what's going to separate him at the next level, because some guys win with elite athleticism and elite physical arm strength and talents like that. Other guys win with their mind, and those guys who win with their mind and that football IQ and their ability to read those defenses, check the top 10 quarterbacks in the NFL. All of those guys possess that trait between the ears. That's what Shedeur Sanders has, and that's why I think people see such a high ceiling for him.
Yeah, and I see it. I see what you're saying. Like the ability to diagnose, make good decisions. That is one of his strengths. The things that I want him to improve upon at the next level are the drifting in the pocket. He drifts so far into the pocket that will get him into trouble at times. But I think that's a product of having a bad offensive line. If I'm the Giants and I draft Shedeur Sanders, I am upgrading our offensive line at all costs. You already have Malik Neighbors. You can draft a corner, or rather a receiver in the second round if you want. Invest in improving the offensive line. You got Andrew Thomas and Jermaine Illuminor at your tackle spots. I'm fine with that. More than fine with that. JMS is going to be your center. John Running's a good left guard. Upgrade at right guard. Whether it's Patrick McCarry or making a big splash play like a Trey Smith. Upgrade at right guard and sign a good depth piece. If you draft a young quarterback like this, Sanders or Cam Ward or Jackson Dart, or do you have a bridge to help them kind of assimilate, you need to have a good offensive line. It has to happen. Imagine Jaden Daniels with the Giants offensive line. Yeah, he'd still be pretty good, but he wouldn't be as good as he is, right? So, that's just how you ruin rookie quarterbacks. It's how you destroy the confidence of a young player, is giving them an offensive line made of Swiss cheese. The Giants have to correct that element. First and foremost, priority number one outside of getting a quarterback, fix your damn offensive line. There's no freaking excuses anymore. If they fail to do that next season, it'll be a fireable offense. Straight up. I mean, it already has been. But, it will be a fireable offense if they don't fix it this year. So, with that being said, Sanders with a good offensive line, which will allow him to not drift so far in the pocket, Anthony, that will correct a lot of his fundamental issues that do exist, right? It will hide the fact that he's not a great athlete, because he will be able to stand in the pocket and keep his eyes downfield and make throws and maneuver in the pocket efficiently. He's good at that. He has great footwork in the pocket. It's just he's not going to escape some of these outside linebackers, these pass rushers. They're too fast. They're too quick. He doesn't have the athletic profile to escape them all the time at the next level. That's just my personal opinion after watching him. So if you haven't watched him, you can watch him. He's not the worst runner in the world, but he's not an athlete like he's not even really close to, in my opinion, the rushing qualities that either Jackson Dart or Cam Ward has. I think that he can run it in from 3 yards, 2 yards from the line, from the end zone. We saw him do that a lot. But from a pure takeoff running, he's not going to be able to do it at the NFL level at a high capacity. So I do think his ability to maneuver in the pocket and not drift will be a huge improvement for him at the next level. Will allow him to reach whatever the ceiling is for Shedeur Sanders. So yeah, I think I was previously very sour on Sanders. I've grown a lot more to like him. I still think there are some red flags, but I'm okay taking him third overall because look, you're forcing Cam Ward or Sanders, guys. I like Cam Ward. I would take him at 3. Sanders, I think I would take him at 3. But you're forcing either of these two guys because in last year's draft class, neither of these two guys are going above pick 15 or 20. Like, that's just the unfortunate truth. This is a weak draft class at the quarterback position. There's a couple of blue chip prospects. But that leads me to our QB3, Anthony and Jackson Dart. And guys, if the Giants decided to go Hunter, Abdul Carter, Mason Graham, Will Johnson, whatever, if they decide to go with one of those guys and we end up with Jackson Dart in the second round, I will be happy because I think Jackson Dart could actually be a steal in this draft class. And we're going to talk about him. Yeah, there are some head-scratching decisions, but we see that with Cam Ward. We see it with Sanders. Not so much the head-scratching decisions with Sanders, but more so just some below-average kind of elements to his game. I think he's more of a consistent option if you want to go in that route. But Jackson Dart is really a home run or bust option here. Like, if with the right development in the right system, he could be a very good NFL quarterback. He's also a year and a half younger than both Ward and Sanders, and I'd like to point that out. He's not even fully developed yet physically. So, from that perspective, from the mental processing perspective, from an offense that's high octane, throwing the ball a lot at Ole Miss, I do believe that there's a lot of upside there. If he sits and learns behind a good veteran bridge, you could see a really decent quarterback in Jackson Dart. He's going to have mistakes, and there's some red flags we're going to talk about, but I think he's a player that is going to rise in this draft class most likely.
Yeah, I will push back against one thing you said there because I agree with pretty much everything else. But there was one note. You said something about him being a kind of a boom or bust player. I actually view Jackson Dart as a very high floor player. I think at the very least, he's going to stick around the NFL for a very long time as a high quality backup. I can't see a world where this kid, with this arm talent, mobility, and just kind of intelligence, I can't see a world where he flames out of the NFL and becomes a complete bust. At the very least, I think that teams are going to be willing to take this guy in the second round because they know that's 4 years of quality backup quarterback play that you can develop into eventual starter potentially. So I like Jackson Dart a lot. You mentioned him as our QB3. Who said he's QB3? No, he is, but he's 3A and Jalen Milroe is 3B, and I'll dive into that in a little bit because honestly, I think those guys are tied for me, but there's just more that I think is translatable. Actually, this is a better way to put it. You mentioned boom or bust for Dart. I'll apply the boom or bust label to Jalen Milroe for sure. I think it's less boom or bust for Dart, which is why he's my 3A and 3B, even though I think they're about the same quality and caliber of a prospect. So what do I like so much about Jackson Dart? I think he's got very sneaky mobility. Alex, actually, I kind of hesitated. I debated on whether or not I was going to text you this, and I ended up not doing it. But I had a unfortunate pro comp come to mind for Jackson Dart. He unfortunately does remind me a lot of Daniel Jones. I think that he has more potential than Daniel Jones ever had, considering the numbers that he put up in the SEC versus the lackluster numbers that Daniel Jones put up in the ACC. However, in terms of playing style, very sneaky plus mobility, sometimes a little bit of a one-read quarterback, has shown that he's got good accuracy when throwing downfield, and has done some very impressive things from an arm strength and, field reading standpoint, but is limited in those same ways. So I think that Daniel Jones is a decent comparison if you want to know what his floor could be, is what I want to clarify that as. I'm not saying that Dart's ceiling is Daniel Jones, because if he was, he'd be much lower down my draft board. But as a floor, a Daniel Jones being an average starter, I could see Jackson Dart having that floor. But his ceiling is much higher because of what he did in the SEC, throwing all those passing attempts and completing so many of them, throwing for so many yards and throwing so many touchdown passes, leading the nation, not the conference, but the nation in passer rating in his final season of college. And one other thing that you mentioned that I love about Dart, he's 21. He's so freaking young, and for that reason, I think another decent comparison that you can make for him as a prospect is J.J. McCarthy, a young guy who had a few years of starting experience, 21 years old, entering the NFL, flew up draft boards because teams were enamored by his intelligence, his young age, and his already ability to read a field and make some really great passes downfield. So the strengths for Dart for me, that arm is solid. His throwing mechanics are very clean. He's got great footwork, and his accuracy on those downfield passes is wholly impressive. Like, he can really drop passes into buckets while on the move too. I think that's important to clarify. He's got an ability to roll left, set his feet real fast, and just rip that thing 40 yards onto the sideline. He has a great arm, especially throwing deep. But if we want to talk about the cons, again, locking into that first read sometimes. He doesn't run that pro style offense like Shedeur does. He runs a collegiate, Lane Kiffin, simplistic, ask the quarterback to do as little as possible offense. And that is a concern. That gives him a barrier, a learning curve entering the NFL. And playing in that offense, because it's so make that first read, make the throw, when he was asked to get to that second, third read, oftentimes panic ensued. And some errant passes would show up all over his tape. So again, there is so much to like with Jackson Dart, and I think the floor is really high for this kid. The ceiling might be a little bit more limited. However, in the right system, I could absolutely see a world, like you said, where he does become a quality starter in the NFL level.
Yeah, I mean, he's the type of guy, though, that, like, he needs a full year to learn and sit. You know, like, Shedeur Sanders, they probably end up starting at some time, like, halfway point in the season. I think that Jackson Dart's one of those guys that, unless you have an injury and, like, might as well just, like, let him learn on the go, like, he needs a full year to sit and learn. But like you said, I mean, look, he's a year and a half younger than those guys. He's coming from a very simple offense that, Lane Kiffin knows how to make quarterbacks look good. But this guy can sling the rock. Like, he's got a really good arm, and he has really solid athleticism. I think for the most part, like, I would be happy taking him in the second round. I don't think if you wanted to trade back up into the first to get him, maybe to get that fifth year option, but I'm not trading up very far. I'm maybe like 31, 32 type of thing. I'm not trading up into the 20s to get him. I don't really think I don't think that he's good enough that he's going to warrant a first round grade unless a team is really desperate. I think that he will be there in the second round, and that's definitely a dart I would be willing to throw, pun intended. So, I do think that end of the day, he's QB3. But this is just for now. Like, we've only evaluated 4 quarterbacks. We really want to dive into guys like Will Howard and McCord as well from Syracuse. Will Howard just won the Natty last night. I mean, looked really freaking good. And by the way, Egbuka, that's another receiver I love. If he's there in the second round, if he went for QB at 3, I'd love Egbuka, or even Trey Harris, another guy. So there are plenty of good underrated receivers in this draft class that I think we will end up doing a lot of evaluation on. But Jackson Dart, we're going to do more film work on him. I think he deserves a whole nother video because we saw one game and what we saw was impressive. But the one red flag that I really had that needs to be fixed is something that you kind of touched on. When he gets to his second read or when the pocket starts to collapse, he bails out of the pocket. Which is why we loved Cam Ward so much. He steps up into the pocket and finds time and keeps his eyes downfield. Sanders drifts back into the pocket but keeps his eyes downfield. Jackson Dart bails out of the pocket and then drops his eyes and then picks his eyes back up and then makes ridiculous throws, which I don't mind. If he makes the throws, I don't really care that his eyes drop. He recalibrates, resets, and he's able to tuck the ball. We see Josh Allen do that a lot, where he tucks the ball, runs out to the outside, and he'll recalibrate and make ridiculous throws. Jackson Dart doesn't have his arm, obviously, but he's got that same kind of attribute where he can do stuff on the run after tucking the ball. What I do think is that he doesn't manage the pocket under stress very well. He's very reactive, very jittery, and I think that's just maybe a lack of experience and a lack of development in that area. I do think that it's going to be a point of emphasis for me at the next level where he has to get better at controlled chaos. Like, when he's in the pocket and things break down, he's got to keep his eyes downfield, keep his structure, keep his base, unless he has no choice but to react and roll out. He does it too often for my liking. I think that he has more time like we've seen him where the pocket, there's space to maneuver inside the pocket, inside the tackle box. He just doesn't take it. The whole play breaks down. He runs around and then he makes a ridiculous throw, which is fine, but it's not going to work all the time in the NFL. So I do think you have to be a little bit more structured in that instance. And I think more experience will help him. And because he's so young, I don't mind the fact that that's a red flag for now. He can definitely iron that out, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, he is so moldable, right? Because he is so young. And yeah, he's had 3 years of starting experience at Ole Miss, but he also was really good playing in that system at Ole Miss. And because he's so young and he's only known that one system, teaching him another system, yeah, it could be a little bit challenging, but he's young. He's going to learn, and he's going to have some things corrected, and he has a really high ceiling because he is so young. So, again, there's so much to like with Jackson Dart. He's very accurate. He's flashing ability to layer throws over the middle of the field, drop it over a linebacker between a safety and a linebacker. He could do those things. He can also extend plays and, keep plays alive and make throws on the run. But he also does have a propensity to force passes, to get jittery feet in the pocket, see his feet and his upper body become unmarried when rushing. That's kind of his thing. Sometimes I really like his timing, and I think he's really well on time to create yards after the catch opportunities for his receivers, hitting them in stride. Other times, his rhythm is completely off, his timing is poor, and he throws passes that are behind or too high or whatever, and it turns into turnover potential plays. So, again, a lot to work on for Jackson Dart. but a lot to love. I really do think if the Giants end up going Carter or Hunter at 3, I'll be pounding the table to move up into the second round and just throw a dart at dart, basically. So, to use that pun that you already used. But now let's talk about the other quarterback. So, one thing that I have to say, Alex, you mentioned it. Jackson Dart, QB3, yes. But again, I said earlier, he's tied at QB3 for me personally. I think you have a larger gap for Dart and Milroe. I think Dart's your solidified 3 and Milroe's your 4th. You're nodding, so I'm not speaking for you. You're confirming that. For me, they're both QB3. It's just QB3A for Dart because I think his floor is higher, and 3B for Milroe because I think his floor is really low. But man, that ceiling is something that gets me excited. And I'll just take the words of an NFL scout. This was reported by ESPN's Matt Miller. This NFL scout anonymously said, I can teach him throwing mechanics. I can teach him read progressions. I can't teach any quarterback 4.3 speed. Paraphrasing, but that's the quote from an NFL scout, and I think that's a great way to summarize Jalen Milroe. He's got a lot of flaws in his game. He's got a lot that he needs to be taught. But man, the things that you can't teach, he has them better than anybody else in this draft class and in the majority of draft classes with that speed, rushing ability, and the qualities that he has in his just pure athleticism and arm strength. He's got a lot to like, but he has a lot to work on. Alex, what are some of the things that you see in Jalen Milroe's game that either excite you or give you concern?
Jalen Milroe is the definition of a project. He is the definition of a guy that needs a substantial amount of work done on him as an NFL quarterback. I mean, he's coming from an Alabama system that did not even use him as a quarterback, really. We're talking about 13, 14, attempts a game. That's not going to happen in the NFL. If you're down 2 scores, you need to throw the freaking rock. He's got to be able to throw the freaking rock because they're just going to stack the box and stop the run against him. I do think that, yeah, the upside is substantial, but he's not going to be a Giant. And the reason for that, the Giants need immediate, at least as close to immediate, kind of talent that can perform at a consistent level immediately. And Jalen Milroe needs 2 years to sit on the bench and learn. That's kind of how I see. Or he can be used as kind of a gadget weapon at quarterback early in his career. That's kind of how I see him playing a role. I could see him going to like the Ravens and being like a gadget piece where they can kind of save Lamar's legs and preserve his health by using Jalen Milroe's rushing qualities. Having him as a 1-2 option with Jared County would be freaking awesome. So that's kind of how I see his career going early on. But for the Giants, I don't really see it for the Giants because we need more consistency now. Jalen Milroe's throwing mechanics I don't love. I think he's all arm, no base, and that's going to be a problem because he never extends the play to throw. He always extends the play to run. So his fundamentals, the second he drops his eyes, it's gone. He's dead as a thrower. He's never going to, I think that's just his game though. I don't think that's ever going to really change personally. I know other people have done it in the past, but he never did it in college. So I don't think at the NFL suddenly he's going to it's going to find it and be a spark, keep his eyes downfield. When his eyes drop, they want him to run. There's always been his game. We want you to take off and make plays happen. I just don't think that's going to happen in the NFL suddenly out of nowhere. He's going to fix that. And it's going to take a long time for him to get used to doing that against professional athletes. So, there's just a lot of work to be done. Yeah, I see the upside, but I see years of work being put into him before he becomes a competent NFL quarterback. That's just kind of how I see it for now. I actually think he should go back to school, but that's just my opinion.
I wouldn't hate the decision to go back to school if he made that decision, but he has declared for the NFL draft, and I don't think he's as much of a project as you do, is the thing. And I see why you think he's a project, and I see why you think he's not a fit for the New York Giants. I've made my argument as to why he's a fit for this Giants team in specific. The Brian Daboll connection. Brian Daboll, formerly from Alabama. You have to keep in mind, Alex, one of the reasons the Giants drafted Malik Nabers in the first round this past year is because Brian Daboll called Nick Saban and asked who was the biggest problem that you face in the SEC this past year, and he said Malik Nabers, and then the Giants went and took Malik Nabers. So that Alabama connection is something that I think Daboll relies on more than we realize, and I think that's a reason why he might have a special interest in Jalen Milroe, plus the other details that I mentioned for Milroe. If you want to make 2 comparisons, and I know they're lofty comparisons, but playing style comparisons for Milroe, the 2 that come to mind immediately are Jalen Hurts, a great rusher from the quarterback position who's got a lot of flaws as a passer, but at times has flashed very high potential as a passer. I think that's a perfect way to describe Hurts, perfect way to describe Milroe. And then the other comparison would be Josh Allen. Because Josh Allen coming out of college, what did everybody say about him? A rare athlete from the quarterback position, a hell of a runner, but he relies on his legs too much. He drops his eyes and takes off. He doesn't go through his progressions nearly enough because he wasn't asked to, and he's wildly inaccurate. but the potential, the potential. That was the selling point for Josh Allen. That is almost the exact same scouting report that Josh Allen had that the one that Jalen Milroe has right now. And no, I'm not saying that Jalen Milroe is going to walk into the NFL and become Josh Allen one day. Josh Allen barely became Josh Allen. His first 2 seasons in the league, he wasn't that great. He turned it around in year 3 and became a superstar. That doesn't happen to everybody. Some of them don't get those 3 years. Some of them don't even figure it out after those 3 years. And that could happen for Dart. So no, guys, I'm not saying that Jalen Milroe is going to be a Josh Allen level player. But I'm saying if you're looking at playing style and you're looking at tools and traits that scouts will fall in love with, the flaws and the weaknesses that Allen presented coming out of Wyoming in 2018 are very similar to the ones that Milroe possesses coming out of Alabama this season. And it's a little bit different for Milroe because he is coming out of Alabama and his offense was different than the one that Allen was playing at in Wyoming, but it's not all that different. And again, the selling points for me with Milroe, the rare athleticism and mobility. That's obvious. But I also think he's got an underrated ability to throw the ball to the right spot. I think he reads defenses better than people give him credit for. I think it's just accuracy that gets in the way of big-time passing completions. He's throwing to the right spot, but he's throwing the ball behind, or he's not getting it there on time, or he's throwing it a little high or a little low, or out of bounds and uncatchable. But he's throwing it to the right receiver. He knows where to go with the ball. He just doesn't get it there accurately. And that, to me, is correctable. I think with the right coach, and I'll actually give you this guy's name, Alex, because I've mentioned this video a few times that I watched that opened my eyes to Josh Allen. You know which one I'm talking about, with his hip mobility that fixed his accuracy. He's a biometrics coach named Chris Hess. He's currently this offseason working with Anthony Richardson. And if I had to give you one bet that I will place this upcoming year, it's that Anthony Richardson is going to have a breakout year because he's working with this guy, Chris Hess. This guy, Chris Hess, completely reworked Josh Allen's fundamentals, his throwing mechanics from top to bottom, and turned him into one of the most accurate quarterbacks in the NFL. For me, if I were Brian Dable and I just drafted Jalen Milroe, I am asking John Mara, whoever, Joe Shane, I'm saying, hand Chris Hess as much money as he desires, take him away from Anthony Richardson and pair him up with Jalen Milroe, make him solely coaching this kid, and watch him fix the mechanics and watch him turn that strong arm into an arm that can throw accurately, not just with power, but with accuracy, and see him develop into a starting quarterback because he does have rare potential. It's just mechanics for me with Jalen Milroe. Obviously, there's a lot more to work on. He wasn't asked to go through his reads, progression. Sure, these are all things that we say about college quarterbacks. He's going to have to work on and be developed and coached. But really, I think his talent is so rare and special. And if he does get the right proper coaching and he learns to throw with more accuracy, which I know is a major challenge, but if he's able to complete more passes in a more accurate fashion, I really think that Jalen Milroe has some rare potential, which is why I think he is about the same caliber prospect for me with Jackson Dart. The floor is much lower than it is with Jackson Dart. I could see Milroe being out of the league in several years because he never figures it out as a passer. However, with Dart, I think he's at the bare minimum going to be a quality backup. But if I had to bet on who's going to be the all-pro out of those two guys, I would say Milroe has a better chance because of the intangible traits that he possesses. So that's my take on Milroe. Again, I think the ceiling is mega high. I think that the floor is really low. But I think that in the right situation, and again, I laid out why I think the Giants could be the right situation because of the Dable connection. I think there's a lot to like with Milroe, and if the Giants did take him, I would be pretty excited about it.
It would be interesting, that's for sure. It wouldn't be my first option, my fourth even, and could be even my fifth after we watch Will Howard. So I don't even know, where our rankings will lie after we look at some of these other guys. Obviously, these are the top 4 consensus, but there's a lot of upside and a lot of floor here. You know what I mean? There's a lot of floor, a lot of really low floors for some of these prospects. Like Cam Ward's floor is low if he doesn't find a balance to his game, but his upside, he could be an all-pro quarterback. That's what his upside is. Sanders, I think, has a really high floor, but his ceiling is capped by his lack of athleticism. But his decision-making and his technique and fundamentals are clean. So there are some red flags. There are some things that will be solved and will be addressed at the next level, and I think he will get better, and he will refine them as long as the offensive line holds its own. Jackson Dart is a major, you throw it at the dart, it could be anything. Jackson, like you said, he is a moldable piece of clay, and I think that's really exciting for Jackson Dart because if he goes to the right system, in fact, you know what? You want to know where I think Jackson Dart should go? Freaking Los Angeles Rams. That is where Jackson Dart should go. Sit behind Matthew Stafford and learn how to run a high-octane passing offense. that is where he can find a lot of success. The Giants, I think the system actually fits him quite well. I just don't know if we can coach a guy to be that, a project like Jackson Dart. Like I do label him a project because there's a lot that needs to happen for him to become a really good NFL player. Just not as much of a project as Sanders or Cam or obviously Jalen Milroe, I think is a much larger project. But with that being said, Jackson Dart and the Giants, I could see it, but they'd have to have a good processing NFL style. Like a Russell Wilson would be a perfect player for Jackson Dart to learn behind, right? Because Russell Wilson, great touch, great deep ball, good processor, veteran, experienced, decent guy. I think that he's just a pretty good mentor for a player like Jackson Dart, who's young, just needs to soak up as much information as possible and apply it. So I do think that whoever the Giants draft, and they probably, and Anthony, this is the interesting thing, whoever their free agent acquisition is at quarterback, and I think they will probably make one early, may be an indication of where they're leaning at in quarterback in the draft, because they probably want to have a similar system for the bridge and the rookie. You want to be able to transition your rookie into a system that is being operated at a certain level for your bridge. So I do think that may give us an indication of who they like, whether it's a Fields. I know Fields posted something on Instagram about the Steelers, so he might be going back there. It could be an option like Russ. It could be a Rodgers or a Doubt, a Kirk. It could be a Jameis. There's a lot of options here. So, we'll see kind of where the Giants go, but that could give us an indication, an inkling of where they might be looking at in the draft. And Milroe, I think he's too much of a project to go at right now. If the Giants already had a quarterback and they wanted to take a shot on a high upside option like that, I could see it. If their system already was built around a system that already kind of predicates himself to his strengths, I could see it. But his game is just too volatile right now for him to be the savior of Joe Schoen and Brian Dable's job. That's just kind of how I personally see it.
I get that that's how you see it, and I get that that's you projecting what the Giants are going to do, but me personally, and pardon my French, fuck the security of Brian Dable and Joe Schoen's jobs. Get me the best players for the football field. That's how I feel about it. So if Joe Schoen, he said it during his press conference, he said that he wasn't going to make short-sighted decisions to save his job. He's going to continue to build for the long term. Let's see. I don't believe him at all. I think he's going to get desperate and he's going to try and save his job with his free agency and draft acquisitions. But if he were being truthful in that assessment, and if he really wasn't planning on making those desperate decisions, Milroe is an attractive target for the Giants with Brian Dable. He has the tools and the traits that Dable has coached properly before. He has an unlimited ceiling, and he's very athletic. He could be a special player. If the Giants are serious about not making desperate moves this offseason, well then, if they don't draft a quarterback in the first round, and Dart's gone as well, then Milroe needs to be that selection in round 2 because he really does have the tools and traits to fit in a Brian Dable offense and be a successful player. But again, I get it. Your standpoint, your perspective here is that you don't think the Giants are going to make that kind of a move. I'm just hoping that they really don't have that short-sighted mentality. I can't give them the benefit of the doubt. I think they're going to have a short-sighted mentality, but I pray I'm wrong, and I pray that they actually make the right decisions to build for the future and build long-term, not just make short-term decisions and then get fired immediately, and then another guy comes in and does the same thing, which is what I'm afraid might happen. But if they're making those long-term decisions, then I don't think their need to win in 2025 should factor into whether or not they draft Jalen Milroe. And I think Jalen Milroe long-term could be a really special player.
Yeah, and I'll wrap it up with this. After evaluating everything, I still think the best option for the Giants right now, the best practice, because of how weak this draft is overall, like the first 10 picks, after that, the gap between the blue chippers and everybody else is substantial, significant. Like you can't even really put it into words. Those top guys, Hunter, Carter. After that, the drop off, it's quick and it's substantial. The second round. So what I think the best practice, if we're ignoring the fact that Joe Schoen and Brian Dable are trying to save their jobs, the best ultimate practice here is to take Hunter or Carter at 3. And then to take a guy like Dart in the second round. That I think is in their bet. I know you disagree with that. That's cool. I know you're like take shots at the quarterback. The best practice is to go BPA at 3 and then take a guy like Dart in the second round because this quarterback class is just that thin. It's just that weak. I know taking a chance, but I can't justify passing on a guy that's going to be elite, not going to be, but has a really high probability of being elite for a quarterback that needs a lot of work. So that's just kind of my perspective.
Well, let me get clarification there. You're saying, because I'm saying Sanders at 3. You're just saying no Sanders at 3? If
I think
Hunter
practice. I think the best practice for the Giants to go Hunter or Carter at 3 and then take a quarterback in the second round. That's, I think, best practice for the Giants in this draft, because I don't have that much conviction in any of the top two QBs.
Well, okay, so even if Cam Ward is on the board, you want Carter or Hunter?
I think it would be a difficult choice. I think I would take Cam Ward if he was there at 3, because I think that he has that upside, but I don't think he will be there. Like, assuming he's not there, I think I would wait till the second round for a quarterback. I still like Sanders, and I think I'd be okay with it. Like, if they took Sanders at 3, I could wrap my head around it. I would support it. But I think the best practice is to take a blue chip prospect at 3 and wait till the second round for a guy like Dart. That's just what I think, because I think you're going to have a bridge anyway, no matter what. And then if it doesn't work out and Dart doesn't see the developmental progress you want him to, they're going to probably get fired anyway. Even if they draft a rookie quarterback, Anthony, they're probably going to get fired. Then you just roll into next year's draft class with a pretty high pick and a chance to get a better quarterback. And I think that's okay for me. You know what I mean? I'm fine, because then you walk away with Hunter or Carter, Dart, and then you could just take a quarterback next year and still get the blue chipper. I think that's probably the best practice, in my opinion.
I don't necessarily disagree with you. And, I've made that point many times. Whoever the Giants draft this year, I'm not married to for 3 years at least. If we land the number 1 pick next year, I will absolutely do the Josh Rosen, Kyler Murray thing, move on from the quarterback and take the blue chip quarterback prospect next year if there is one to be drafted. So that's how I feel about it. But for me personally, if you've got 2 quarterbacks at the top of the draft, picking number 3 overall, and you think that they can be franchise guys, you don't play around, you just take them. You throw a dart at the board. So I get what you're saying. And listen, Carter and Hunter, man, will they be very difficult to pass up on at number 3 overall. And I get why it might sting for Giants fans, but man, it doesn't even matter how good they are if you don't have a franchise quarterback. So I'm taking that chance with Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders. Now, I wouldn't take a Dart or a Milroe at 3. Let me clarify that, because it almost sounded like you said that I might. I wouldn't do that. There's no way I would take Dart or Milroe at number 3 overall. What I would do, though, if Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders are off the board, I'm taking the BPA, as you said, at number 3, Carter or Hunter, and I'm trading back up into the back end of the first round, and I'm taking one of those quarterbacks there so that I get the 5th-year option. And still, that first round, 27th overall, 32nd overall pick quarterback doesn't prevent me from drafting a quarterback in 2026. I'm fine moving on from them and burning a first-round pick. I don't care, because I just need to keep throwing darts until I get the right franchise quarterback in here. That's how I feel about it. So I agree with you. I don't necessarily 100% subscribe to the belief. Like, I subscribe to the BPA belief outside of the quarterback position, because you have to throw darts at it. So I'll take Sanders. I'll take Ward at number 3. If it's not those 2 guys, I'll take the best player available, and that's not going to be Dart or Milroe. But I will make sure that I walk out of the first round of the draft with a quarterback on a 5th-year option contract, because I think that is completely necessary. Again, even just to make him a tradable asset that you could ship off for a second-round pick the following year and use that to get another quarterback in 2026. It's totally something that I would keep in mind. So we're in agreement pretty much for the most part. Our rankings are very similar. We view these prospects a little bit differently, but very similar at the same time. And again, as we've said throughout this, and as you just mentioned in your wrap-up, we've got a lot of time between now and April. We're going to watch a lot more film on these guys, and we're going to make a lot of interesting decisions and evaluations on them between now and April. And our draft boards are inevitably going to shift and change. And we're going to have this year draft boards that we post for you guys with grades, our personal thoughts and opinions on these prospects. And we're really excited to present all of that content to you guys on this YouTube channel, on Apple and Spotify, and on our social media channels at Fireside Giants. So make sure you're following along with us there so you don't miss out on that extra content. But that's pretty much going to wrap this one up. A really fun, hour-long discussion on these 4 quarterbacks. High-quality content for you guys. Make sure that you leave a like and support us on this one. Subscribe if you're new. Ring the bell so you don't miss an episode. Make sure you leave us 5 stars if you're listening on an audio platform, and follow us on all of our social media channels at Fireside Giants. Without further ado, we will catch you on the next one. Have a good one, and let's go Giants.
Perfect.